3,700 new cases of coronavirus infection have been detected in Georgia, as a result of which the total number of infection has increased to 93,000. At this time, 73,877 people have been recovered from COVID-19.
The death toll rose from 37 to 853. At this stage, 2,186 people are in quarantine and 5,833 people are in the hospital under supervision. 3,518 patients are being treated at the COVID hotels.
As of Friday, Russia's new cases, 23,610, total cases of infection around 2 million, number of recovered 1.5 million, death toll 34,387 people, death toll in last 24 hours 463 people.
Ukraine cases up by around 13,000, total cases of infection 583,000, number of recovered 266,000, death toll to over 10,000 people, death toll in last 24 hours 257 people.
Turkey coronavirus numbers, new cases up to 4,215. The total number of cases of infection is 425,000. The number of recovered 361,000. 11,820 people died. 116 people died just in the last 24 hours.
Armenia, new cases up by around 2,000, total cases of infection 122,000, number of recovered 88,000, death toll around 2,000 people, death toll in last 24 hours 31 people.
Azerbaijan new cases is around 2,600. The total number of infection is about 84,000. The number of recovered around 60,000. The death toll was 1,053 people. The death toll in the last 24 hours was 23. This is the Checkpoints, hosted and co-authored by Elena Kvanchilashvili and myself. I'm Georgi Sakadze. It's Sunday and we meet each other to talk about business and economy.
Yes, it is Sunday, 10 p.m., the day after the elections, and both of us have a feeling that what government calls point restrictions will be targeting more sectors and will be much stricter. Our headline showed you the situation not only in Georgia, but in the whole region, and world statistics are not less gloomier, unfortunately.
Yes, this is not an easy situation, neither from the epidemiological nor from economic standpoint, and probably that's why the government of Georgia highlights every time it has a chance that the full lockdown is not an issue on the agenda today. However, point restrictions are inevitable.
This is exactly what we heard from the Finance Minister Ivane Machavariani this week. This is what head of NCDC has been focusing on in his almost every interview and comment. And this was probably the reason that the Business Association of Georgia, the largest umbrella organization for Georgian businesses, highlighted once again this week that the government has to think about releasing HoReCa sector from the revenue tax obligations.
The government is working on the new stimulus package, and hopefully we can have more soon to share with our viewers. What we hear now and what the Interagency Council is now considering is what type of point restrictions could be further added to the already existing list. We hear that the malls may be closed, restaurants may be closed, public transport may be restricted, beauty salons may be closed, and so forth. And if not from Monday, then the next week, most probably.
And the Interagency Coordination Council meetings have increased their meeting frequency, and definitely it is obvious that the measures are being discussed almost on a daily basis. When we asked healthcare specialists what needs to be done for the better management of the pandemic in Georgia, one recommendation there is to expand the council and include more people, more voices, more business representatives. Our journalist Anna Tavadze covered the press conference organized by EPRC, where the Working Group on Healthcare released a statement on the conditions created by the COVID-19.
The epidemiological reality of Georgia has been getting more and more tense. Coronavirus poses a major challenge to Georgia as well as to numerous other countries. As of November 20, confirmed coronavirus cases reach over 96,800, with the daily cases exceeding 3,700. Georgia ranks 16th by the number of mortality per 100,000 inhabitants for the last 7 days. According to the National Center for Disease Control and Public Health, the number of daily cases is increasing. However, the number of daily tests is not proportionally increasing. This suggests that actual cases of COVID-19 are higher in the country compared to the number of clinically detected, confirmed, and officially recorded cases. As a result, an appeal was prepared by a working group of health experts within the joint platform of the Economic Policy Research Center and the USAID Good Governance Initiative. The action plan proposed by the team stresses the importance of strengthening the management mechanism of the epidemic response measures in the country, the need for the usage of the medical services, which should be reduced to avoid the collapse of the whole healthcare system, and the improvement of the public awareness, quality of communication.
Yes, we offer to our government to rethink the process of decision-making, to think how to ease the pressure on our health sector, and to improve the communication, to make it more effective, more understandable, and it also will help to make decision-making process more transparent.
Now is the time to listen to many people, to make decisions based on evidences that we have, to have much more better communication with the society, with the people, because our citizens, they need more explanations why these services are in place or why that services are not. There are scarce resources in this country, and one should understand that those resources should be spent much more wisely and targetfully. And the main idea is that we need better coordination, much more better and effective management.
Many questions are asked about whether the government has used the past 8 months efficiently and effectively. Experts give a brief overview of the past, however, choose to focus on current and future developments and advise the government to do the same.
I would say that some of the measures, of course, they were very rational, and on the first stage was very effective when basically the epidemic stopped in the country. However, how system prepared, it's under the question, because we see now the many problems and many things, many chaotic things in this system, and I think system is not, they are not very well prepared, so they just lost this 8 months in order to prepare very well.
To commend the past, let me share our agreed vision, which we put in our appeal, that nowadays it's not a time to talk about the mistakes that we have made in the past. Nowadays we have to be prepared for the forthcoming months, because the number of infected persons are going up, and nowadays our health sector is under great pressure.
Many opportunities have been missed, and we think that government could do much more better if the process would be more inclusive. They would use more intellectual resources that are in this country.
As for the economic implications, the lockdown measures of the past were quite strict, one of the strictest in the world, and has negatively impacted Georgia's mainly practice-based economy. Irina Guruli, deputy director of EPRC, states that the strict lockdown will once again put a heavy burden on the country's economy.
So we believe that a strict lockdown will be quite a heavy burden on the economic situation in Georgia, since the country is very much dependent on tourism and such other service sectors that have been affected by the pandemics anyways. So a strict lockdown would create a stronger pressure, negative pressure on the economy. We believe that strict lockdown also is not way out of the current situation, and many of the research proves that it has not been an effective measure to combat the virus. So we think that the measures that are taken up to now, which are very specific on-spot and ad hoc type of decisions of closing and restricting different entities, is the better way to go. And we also think that in terms of education, schools should be reopened, and educational practices should be moved to schools.
So, Georgi, such are the recommendations of the working group of healthcare so far. One thing is for sure, the vaccine is not only the remedy for the health issues, but for the economic pandemic as well. And we could argue that the results of such pandemic are even further reaching than the COVID-19 pandemic.
Yes, and not only Georgia, all the countries in the world are waiting impatiently for the vaccine, and for them as well, nationwide lockdowns are not an easy decision to take, taking into account that these are the countries that are far more developed and richer, rather richer than Georgia.
The video we have been discussing, Georgi, the other day from Forbes, featuring Dr. Anthony Fauci, is a very good illustration of this, where Fauci also denounces a full lockdown and stresses that people need to be convinced to use the vaccine after it hits the market.
Let's show our viewers the video that you have mentioned. So here is Dr. Anthony Fauci's take on how to manage COVID-19.
We're not going to get a national lockdown. I think that's very clear, but I think what we're going to start seeing in the local levels, be they governors or mayors or people at the local level, will do, as you said, very surgical type of restrictions, which are the functional equivalent of a local lockdown. We have vaccines now. The first one that came out was highly effective. I anticipate that the second one likely will be comparable. You never can tell until you see the data, but would be comparable. That's great, but we have to get people to take the vaccine. So if we get the overwhelming majority of people taking the vaccine, and you have on the one hand an effective vaccine, on the other hand a high degree of uptake of the vaccine, we could start getting things back to relative normal as we get into the second and third quarter of the year.
Shortly and very well put from Mr. Fauci, Georgi, you will agree.
I do.
Another American worth mentioning this week is definitely Secretary Pompeo, Mike Pompeo, who visited Georgia and reiterated the United States' full support to Georgia to continue its democratic development, Euro-Atlantic aspirations, and a very strong message on rule of law and justice in the country. We decided to collect all the tweets from Secretary Pompeo during his visit in Georgia to give you the impression on his official visit to our country.
This week, U.S. Secretary of State Michael Pompeo visited Georgia as a part of a planned tour to discuss some of the most pressing issues of the region. During his short visit, Secretary Pompeo met with President Zurabishvili, Prime Minister Gacharia, Foreign Affairs Minister Zalkalani, representatives of the civil sector, and the Patriarch Ilya II. Our region and the world needs a peaceful, stable, and a democratic Caucasia, Georgian President Zurabishvili told Pompeo. The president thanked the U.S. Secretary of State for his strong support for Georgia's sovereignty and territorial integrity, and noted that there is no alternative to achieving peaceful deoccupation, which requires effective negotiations. The secretary reaffirmed the United States' commitment to Georgia's sovereignty and territorial integrity and commended the country for its contributions to the fight against global terrorism. Pompeo also met with Prime Minister Gacharia and Foreign Minister Zalkalani to discuss the United States' support for Georgia's strengthening democratic institutions. The secretary emphasized the importance of electoral and judicial reform, economic development, and fight against occupation.
We have many important topics to discuss today. Your point's well taken too. The world, and certainly Georgia, is in the middle of a terrible challenge from this virus that was released from China. We will address this together. keep our people safe and we'll get our economies back up and going again. This is central for the prosperity of your country, of the region, and of the world.
Prime Minister Gacharia reassured the Secretary of State that deepening cooperation between the United States and Georgia on defense and security issues, as well as economic and democratic consolidation, is a top priority.
First of all, I would like to underline that we really appreciate United States people and government support, continuous support of territorial integrity and sovereignty of Georgia. You know how it's important for the country, for occupied country.
Pompeo also met with civil society representatives for a frank and open discussion about the role of civil society in Georgia's development. He highlighted Georgia's recent judicial reform efforts, the role of important civil society in advancing the rule of law and developing modern state institutions. However, all agreed that there is more work to be done and the United States stands ready to continue its support. Included in the meeting were representatives of some of the many professional NGOs dedicated to improving Georgia's democracy. Economic Policy Research Center was one of them. Executive Director of EPRC, Nino Evgenidze, commented on the meeting afterwards. We talked about the problems that exist in the country. We emphasized how informal governance is reversing democratic processes in the country. We raised issues of improving democratic governance and said that oligarchy has to be abolished. Attention was also paid to the disruption of the construction of Anaklia Port. It was noted that the deterioration of the investment environment in the country is a serious problem, hindering the way to creating jobs, bringing new investments, and overcoming poverty. Secretary Pompeo also met with His Holiness Georgian Orthodox Church Patriarch Ilya II. During the meeting, they discussed Georgia's important role in promoting and protecting religious freedoms around the world.
The Secretary also met with His Holiness. The Georgian Orthodox Church continues to play a vital role in protecting Georgia's unique culture and traditions, as it has throughout the ages. In his meeting with His Holiness, Secretary Pompeo highlighted Georgia's role in the International Religious Freedom Alliance and noted the importance of promoting and defending religious freedom so that everyone can practice his religion and beliefs in freedom.
Pompeo left Tbilisi with the following message: I am confident that our strong, dynamic bilateral relationships are firmly grounded in our shared values and commitment to Georgia's territorial integrity. The U.S. Ambassador to Georgia, Kelly Deknin, also voiced a shared message.
Secretary and Mrs. Pompeo's visit is a reaffirmation of the close strategic partnership between the United States and Georgia. We stand ready to support our friend as Georgia continues its efforts to deepen its Euro-Atlantic ties, stimulate economic growth, and contribute to the stability and security of its region and beyond. Didi Madloba.
Not to lower the scale and the international multitude that we have been targeting in today's edition of the Checkpoints, let's turn to business. To business now, and to Nodar Giorgadze, a Georgian-born businessman who lives in Slovakia, now running businesses as there as well.
Yes, Gino Wellness Center in Rabat and Tsketa, and Gino Paradise in Tbilisi, a very good and popular family time place that children love the most.
Yeah, and much more than the holding is quite big and quite diverse, and what we will see from Anna Tavadze's footage now is that this diversity was a wise decision from the businessman. The effect of pandemic and the ways to adapt to the tough times from Nodar Giorgadze in the Checkpoints.
Gino Holding, an investor of 44 million euros, has temporarily closed all businesses in Georgia. Nodar Giorgadze, a Georgian businessman living in Slovakia, talks about the projects he managed in Georgia before the pandemic, the effects of the current crisis, and future plans.
During the pandemic, it was difficult for me to do business in Georgia because everything was closed here except for construction. Hotels Gino Wellness Mtsketa and Gino Wellness Rabat, Aquapark Gino Paradise are also closed. Although we had the right to operate in the summer, the season turned out to be very weak because people were scared of pandemic. I tried for a few months to cover expenses with my own finances, including the payroll, income, etc. From October to November, we could only keep 35-40% of the employees because everything was closed. I was forced to put the rest of the staff on unpaid leave. It was a tough decision because all employees have families.
Due to the pandemic, the expenses of the business group have been increased by an additional 1.5 to 2 million lari. The business did not have profits until the pandemic, but Nodar Giorgadze, who calls himself an emotional investor, did not stop investing in the hope of the future. He says he will not change his plans and will implement another 547 million euro investment project. However, due to the current uncertainty, he can no longer see the potential for recovering increased expenses or even profiting in the near future.
All my investments in Georgia have more emotional side than profit. I haven't made any investments that would have profited me in 5-7 years. Every year we have to invest about 2-3 million Georgian lari to keep this business running and get people accustomed to the modern way of life. We need to invest 2-3 million for business development additionally. Therefore, even before the pandemic, I was not in a position to make a profit.
The other businesses in the group, mainly in the construction sector, do not stop. The construction of a 220-room hotel in the Tbilisi Sea area continues. One thing that the investor is sure of is that if Georgia wants to be established in the world map and develop consistently, then it must definitely become a full member of the European Union and NATO.
Slovakia is a small country. In 2021, Slovakia will receive an additional 11 billion euros from the European Union to sustain and restore the economy. Slovakia's GDP is 89 billion euros, per capita is about 16,700 euros. We must consider that Georgia lags far behind Europe in these matters, and the sooner Georgia becomes a member of the EU and NATO, the sooner we will move forward.
When the doors of Gino Paradise will be reopened and when we will be able to re-access the water slides will be decided upon the effectiveness of Georgia's resistance towards economic downsliding.
Georgi, the thought now that I have while watching Anna's footage on Nodar Giorgadze's rich portfolio, which was much fully depicted in Forbes Week today, though it was in Georgian, is that it would be great to have more of such investments, both from local and foreign investors. Do you think Enterprise Georgia's new initiative that's been discussed right now could draw more FDI to the country?
Be honest, Elena, we should wait and see, definitely, since it is such a new initiative. The checkpoints decided to sit down with Mikhail Hidureli, heading the Enterprise Georgia agency, for more details.
Yes, and it will be very useful since all we know till this interview is that the government is launching a new program to attract foreign investment. It will help the investor who will invest 10 million and employ at least 150 people with 1 million Georgian lari.
Yeah. Mikhail Hidureli, head of Enterprise Georgia, about the government's new initiative to draw FDI to this country, the very first commentary on the topic and details for the Checkpoint viewers.
So within increased competition, the FDI grant program will make our investment offer even more attractive. That's one of your latest quotes in this regards, but be honest, BMG and Forbes was privileged personally from you and your team while teasing this news through our news agencies and our shows. So it's official, Misha, already. So what can we say right now in Brighter Days? Go ahead.
You're right, Georgi. It is official now. When we were talking about it, it was still under construction. I think this is one of the, I would say, historic initiatives in terms of FDI attraction. I think we never done as a country something like this. The tool and the program itself is not inventing a new wheel, definitely. A lot of countries are using this. especially the countries that are like very prone to attracting investments and that are very FDI-driven countries. This is a very interesting mechanism, providing investors an additional incentive. So the mechanism is very simple, but also very efficient in terms of administration as well. So the thing is that if you are an investor from a given list of the sectors, which is automotive parts, electronic parts, aerospace parts, and also the services like business process outsourcing and other services, the target sectors that we as a country are targeting, then you are eligible to get a grant of a maximum 1 million Georgian lari. But to do that in 3 years' time, you have to employ at least 150 people if you are a manufacturer and at least 200 people if you are a BPO company. At the same time, you have to invest at least 10 million Georgian lari if you are a manufacturing company and 5 million if you are a BPO company. Once you do that, after 3 years' time, you do the audit, and then we see whether you accomplished all the goals or not, and then we give you the grant. The grant can be spent, the money that will reimburse have to be spent only for two things. One thing is a workforce training. This is a kind of challenge in Georgia for investors, so we wanted to cover up that weakness with that. And the second thing is to spend the money for infrastructure. It can be anything like communications or any job that any money that you can spend on infrastructure. It might be utilities and stuff like that. So for to these things, investor comes to us, initiates and says that he wants to invest money and he wants to enroll in our grants program. We sign an agreement, then we follow up.
Oh, okay. So it's a part that was my pre-last question. That it's a sort of agreement which is going to be legalized between yourself. As an agency, Misha, am I right? Agency and investor, or it's going to be Ministry of Economy or whoever?
As an agency on behalf of the government. So yeah.
Okay, correct.
We will be the second part.
And it's going to be a legal paper, correct?
Okay, yeah. It will be a legal paper which will enlist all the liabilities of the companies, and once they do that, and once we see in the audit document that they have really employed the people, really invested in money, only after that we give the cash back. It's a cash back, it's not a grant, which is a good thing, which means that we're safe. We don't really give out anything unless we know that the money was spent.
Yeah, that's why I mentioned in Business Morning just today's shows that it's a sort of cashback personally for me, which is quite business-wise in these relations. Do we have any kind of, I'm not talking about affiliations, Misha, but samples as a models, how other countries are doing in this regards? I know that you personally with your team, Tornike and others, all your agency, you are following all the activities, how the real world war goes, not only with coronavirus, but for the period after coronavirus, post-pandemic period, where FDI, where attracting investments going to be the most challengeable. How other countries are doing, and where do we stand as a country?
Okay, I think the question is really interesting. You're right that we have, I think, at least this year, we have, I think, knocked at almost all doors where these questions are being answered. These are the location scouts. I think we pretty much covered the big ones. We still have some visits underway, and this is, as I'm always saying, this is a very small circle. So these people are talking to each other. So what they say is actually what is happening in the world. Of course, the competition is fierce. A lot of countries are trying to either do the structural reforms like taxation and stuff like that, or they're trying to introduce the new incentives like FDI grants, like different kind of cashbacks on salaries. So this is, I think, I always take an example that, of course, investor will not make decisions solely depending on this FDI grant. We all know that. But if investor is comparing two countries with more or less similar capabilities and capacities, then FDI incentive gives you a step forward, which is actually logical. So I think this will be an addition to our very good value proposition. I'm very objectively speaking, from the investor side, Georgia truly has a good business-friendly climate. Taxation, low bureaucracy, and with the best thing is that we know what we are targeting. We are not just moonwalking. We know that we need 4-5 sectors, and we know exactly the companies that we are going to come and offer this new incentive very soon.
I know the FDI grant, it's not going to be your last, and it cannot be your last initiative coming on behalf of Georgian government. Tell me whatever you can deliver or tease again through our, the checkpoints, which is more, you've been the first guest speaker of our program, so you know that it's more expat and oriented on our foreign economic relations and investors. So can you just state on behalf of the government that there will be still some more initiatives attracting investors to Georgia during post-pandemic period, because we're so hopeful in regards of vaccine for the last news what we have from Pfizer and Moderna. Go ahead, Misha.
Yes, I can follow the tradition that we have of saying something and then following up. So we can confirm that very soon we will announce another very interesting program. This will not be announced by the government, but this will be announced by Enterprise Georgia with the help of the government and with the help of a donor organization. So this will be also one of the things that we never done, and this will be a very, very practical tool to attract investments. You could even say most practical tool to attract investments.
Can say more. We'll wait for your feedback in this regards as well, and by then, good luck to Georgia, Misha.
So yes, we need more FDI to this country, definitely, especially in the period of pandemic, and for the post-pandemic economy to thrive more easily.
Couldn't agree more, Georgi. We have always highlighted that FDI is more than investment. It is know-how, it is skills, it is research and development culture of doing business. And it makes me feel so much proud when I can find people in Georgia who have proactively made R&D their business and are quite successful in what they do, leading the market in that direction.
And I know where Elena right now is leading to. Yes, the cover of Forbes Woman Georgia showcasing Natia Tsabutashvili is the exact example of your words.
Yes, let's see the teaser then of the new Forbes Woman issue with this and much more to make you motivated and inspired.
The story starts in 2015. This is the time when DNA research was not conducted in Georgia at all. Natia Tsabutashvili, the main character of the October-November issue of Forbes Woman Georgia, took up this task with a non-commercial idea. 5 years have passed since then, and now she's the founder of HealthMart Group. Read her story on the front line of genetics in the new issue of Forbes Woman Georgia, already on sale. In the October-November issue, you will also read Diana Melikishvili's path to success, a self-made career, and Nini Rogoberidze's plans. What opportunities does Visa, as a world leader in digital payments, create for women entrepreneurs? The question is answered by regional manager Christina Doroshi. You will also read about the company that started with the idea of two friends returning to their homeland. Today, they're known as the successful 1991s in the film industry. Clothes close to nature, the case of Tako Megrelishvili, Tamare Nino Mesarkishvili, another successful example of strong and independent women. Heritage and the new generation are among the top priorities for TBC Bank. That is why the segment Here Now is dedicated to heritage and modernity. In the new edition of Forbes Woman Georgia, you will also read Helmet as a symbol of harmony, very colorful daraya. Lako Bukia, for those who are not afraid of courage, a business that colors daily life. A gift shop of limited items. For many more in-depth insights into the women-led startups and businesses, read October-November's issue of Forbes Woman Georgia.
From Forbes Woman to Forbes Georgia and 30 under 30, Musa Keburia is a graphic designer by profession. She first painted at the age of 3 and has not stopped doing so since. She's one of the most distinguished street artists. The goal is to deal with even bigger and larger walls, and with its small contribution, Georgia should occupy an important place on the world street art map.
Yes, so interesting. And notably, Georgi, apart from Tbilisi, you will meet Musia's paintings in different parts of Georgia: Akhalkalaki, Batumi, Chokhatauri, Gudauri, Kutaisi. She has left her mark in Ukraine, also Norway and Lisbon.
So let's meet Musia Keburia from Forbes Georgia's 30 under 30 list.
Whenever I participate in different festivals, I always try to make my art have a theme or a meaning. I usually tend to voice social and global issues. As for my private projects, the meaning of my art depends on the client's vision. That vision is then illustrated in my ideas, concepts, and sketches. I used to create art that was dedicated to expressing protest regarding that period or state of being. As for now, I always try to express protest, whether it's ecology or other social issues, in a way that makes an impact and influences people. An artist that draws on the walls and makes outdoor illustrations has street art as a weapon, which allows the artist to talk about issues important for people to see daily. If we look at street artists globally, their work proves that the tool itself has the power to impact many things. As I have observed, street art has become more popular and demand for it has increased. The culture of street art is advancing in Georgia. Opinions about street art vary, but that's a given. Street art has its own specific aim, so I definitely don't think that everything should be painted over. When, where, and how of it all is extremely important. Street art is in close connection with thinking processes and creativity. I wouldn't say that street art is a business. In my opinion, it's a certain form of art that I love the most. My dedication, therefore, is appreciated. I never stop. I always try to paint more and self-develop.
We have been focusing on private companies so far. Georgi, let us shift to the state-owned companies, and namely railway
Georgia
for a
Railway.
moment. Yes.
Here we have an updated, quite a hot one, rating for Georgian Railway from Fitch Ratings. It has affirmed that Georgian Railway long-term foreign and local currency issuer default ratings, IDRs, at BB minus with negative outlooks. The affirmation reflects Fitch expectations that Georgian Railway's link with the government will remain unchanged, while its debt metrics will commensurate with its standalone credit profile assessment at B+, leading to a single-notch differential of Georgian Railway's IDR with Georgia's sovereign IDR, BB negative.
Yes, I think we will be returning to this topic, Georgi, in our next programs. And this interview with the chief economist of EBRD that we will be running now is in touch with all the points that we have had in the checkpoints today. State-owned companies is just one point of the recent report from EBRD titled State Strikes Back. EBRD's two main points are, first, there is a natural demand for the larger and stronger state from business and voters during the pandemic, but EBRD stresses that this appetite should be tightened back to prudent fiscal policies after the pandemic ends. And second, there should be left the free space for the private sector to take risks, to take decisions, and to have direct communication with its customers and consumers, since this is what drives innovation and economic growth.
Seems quite interesting.
Thank you.
Yeah. Dimitar Bogov sat down with the checkpoints, especially with Elena, in what seems to be today's closing interview of the program.
I came across this very interesting report, which is titled State Strikes Back. Why that choice of the verb strikes? What does that mean?
Yes, interesting title. Even before COVID-19 pandemic, the role of the state was rising. So since the beginning of the century, there were more nationalizations than privatizations in the advanced economies. we all remember global financial crisis in 2008 and deep recession that followed, and it showed that financial markets does not provide socially optimal outcomes. Actually, poor are bearing more severe consequences in the downfall while benefiting less in time of prosperity, adding to the growing inequality. The climate change is another factor, and consequences of the climate change has made it clear that government intervention is also required at national and international level to prevent some coordination failures, to boost green innovation, and to address market failures. Therefore, this title reflects both the trend towards growing acceptance of state involvement and also the increased expectations that are now being placed on the state.
But with all of the this range of problems or the range of issues that you have stated, all of them are still problematic, even though state is intervening into the free market, so to say, more and more. Then what justifies that there should be this intervention? Maybe the free market works better. How do we know?
I would say that yes, I'm for market economy. During COVID pandemic, there was also a tendency to widen the social safety nets by sharing the salary costs of firms' employees and giving tax holidays to the firms. Of course, those countries with bigger fiscal space and easier access to financial markets were more generous. It is important this to be of temporary nature, because the fiscal policy and public debt levels are already overstretched. Once the crisis is over, there should be return to the pre-crisis level of social safety nets.
How easy will that be, Mr. Bogov? Because we both understand that sometimes these are not strictly financial or economic measures. Sometimes these become very heavy political measures as well, targeted towards the interests of electorate, so to say, voters. So how easy will that be to unwind this tendency of state striking back?
That would not be easy. That would not be easy for many reasons. However, we have to be aware that in the history there are cycles. And for example, after the Second World War, there was a cycle that of growing nationalizations, of growing role of the state. There were nationalizations. But then in the 70s, 80s, 90s, there was another cycle of privatizations, denationalizations, and now we're witnessing again the return of trend of state having a bigger share in the economy, even entering into the businesses by having more state-owned enterprises.
What does this history, sorry for interrupting, but what does this history show us? Is the state a good manager?
The history shows that it is not a good manager. But also we know that state is already a dominant player in several sectors like energy, utilities, railway, ports. And during pandemic, state-owned enterprises acted as automatic stabilizers, offering stable employment. So there's a danger that the state will like to keep the larger role it played in the pandemic. And on the other hand, there will be readiness by the society to accept it. And that would have very negative impact on the creative destruction and innovation that are the major driving force of development. And at the end, it will lower the growth rate of the economy. So definitely there should be a tendency of state to withdraw from the sectors that usually it's not a good manager.
Yeah, especially in this COVID-19 light and the impact it had on the economy, we hear that, of course, we need tourism recovery in the first place since the economy is so dependent on this sector. But another is also like drawing FDI to this country. Do you think at some point state and state-owned players may become competitors to the private players on the market, and how does that impact business activity in general?
I hope state will not enter such sectors as tourism and some other which are purely market sectors and should be left to the private sector to manage and operate. However, state could play some very important role in facilitating the growth of these sectors by promoting Georgian tourism, by creating good infrastructure, by attracting tourists in the country. But then the pure business of dealing with tourism, hospitality sector, definitely it should be in the hands of the private sector.
Yeah, this report also focused on state-owned banks. Fortunately, this is a very long and forgotten history for Georgia. We do not have state-owned banks in this country. But why that?
And that is good, and that is very good.
Yes, I would agree there. But why is that a focus there? To kind of like cover all the countries in the region who might have state-owned banks, or do you see the risks for the state appetite to grow, so to own its own banks?
Well, when we are talking about state-owned banks, we need to have into account actually two things. State-owned banks in some countries are preferred model of ownership, and yes, state-owned banks dominate. But there are other countries where state-owned banks dominate, but they dominate because of the circumstances, like Ukraine. It's very typical example. There was a banking crisis, so state saved some of the systemically important banks, injected capital, and those banks became state-owned. However, it does not mean that those state-owned banks will remain in the state ownership, and state at a certain point of time, when there will be good market conditions, will sell these banks on the market. In general, state-owned banks have worse portfolios than private-owned banks, and they have less profitability than private-owned banks. But you mentioned whether it's good that Georgia does not have.
Oh no, I won't ask that question.
It is very good. Of course, we need to be aware that private sector is not always the most efficient for some highly risky projects. For such situations, obviously there is market failure, and this market failure could be covered by state intervention, but not state intervention with creation of state-owned banks, but rather maybe some guarantee programs that would reduce the risk that market players are ready to take, but still leaving to the private banks to do the job and to interact with the clients to decide which clients should be created.
Yeah, when you mentioned several times 2008 and 2009 global financial crisis, but we always highlight and underline that COVID-19 pandemic is not typically the same as a financial crisis, because it doesn't have this financial or economic basis. It is a health basis. I mean, we need a vaccine first and then everything else, including structural reforms. So do you think that tendency that state might become big is still there? Even though these crises are different by their nature, and why that happens so?
You know, during the pandemic, people were in search of a protector, someone who will protect them from the pandemic, someone who will protect them from economic difficulties that pandemic caused, and the state played the natural role for that. However, once the crisis is over, state should withdraw and leave the room for market forces and market economy to work. It's easier to say than to happen. So in reality, state does not want to withdraw from the territory that it already occupied.
Now that we are discussing this, and EBRD has a special report on this, what are the signs? Do you think COVID-19 has the strength to kind of like revisit capitalism and free market and the rule that works like democracy? I mean, it's not perfect, but it's still the best to the point.
I fully agree with you. You phrase it very well. It's not the perfect, but still it's the best system that we know. I don't think the time of capitalism expired. Capitalism will continue to dominate the world because it's the most efficient system that we know so far. But we saw some weaknesses of capitalism, and the crisis actually exposed those weaknesses. And I think exactly there will be some maybe reshuffling, some improvements with the state taking its role and to take care that the benefits of the global development are more equally distributed among the population.
For something to be equally distributed, it needs to be generated first. Thank you so much, and thank you for a very interesting report as well. Thank you.
Thank you for the invitation. It was a pleasure to be with you.
So, this is all for today. We'll see you next Sunday at 10 p.m. with more business and economy news, stories, and analysis.
Follow us on BMG and Forbes and send us your feedback. We're interested. See you soon.
See you.